Hello, good morning.
Sir, good morning, sir. Good morning.
How are you?
Very good morning.
So where do I share? I have never used WebEx for sharing.
Okay. So there is, sir, a block here, share in the down portion.
But I think you have to make me give me the permission, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, sure. I'm giving you, sir.
I just wanted to check,
Yeah.
Thank you. Now everything is under control. Let
That's fine, sir.
me just try.
Yeah,
That.
sure. Webex is downloaded on your laptop or system.
Yeah. Because our
Okay, fine.
is
Yeah,
visible now.
it's visible.
Full screen.
Yeah.
Okay.
Fine.
Thank you.
Fine.
So then I'll stop sharing now.
Yeah.
How do I make it enlarged? Oh, here I think.
Yeah,
Okay.
from here you can green button if you have green button from left side on your this presentation.
No, that I know.
Uh,
Not. I just want to go back to the WebEx full thing because let me just figure out. How do I stop sharing? Okay.
yeah,
I
you
just
can
put that.
stop.
Share content, share my meeting. Okay. I think it's all right. We can see each other. So,
Yeah.
so you have put in great effort. Thank you very much for arranging this.
No, so it's all from your all efforts and your
No, you see, it requires, I know, a lot of patience and cajoling and
yeah.
ask
Sure.
people repeatedly. Yeah, I understand that. Yeah.
How is sir going in physics department at IIT Delhi?
Oh,
Professor
it's
B.R. Mehta is there, na? I think.
Bihar Mehta is there. He has superannuated, but he's continuing to with us. But, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. The Professor Deshmukh was here as a director from IIT
Yeah,
Delhi.
I know. Yeah. Hopefully, very soon nothing will be online. Everything will be,
Yeah.
especially classes. I think
Okay.
online classes are a problematic thing.
Yeah. So let us wait for some time for all participants to
Yeah.
join. Yeah. Hmm.
Come in a bit.
So restrict classes are going on online in the IT Delhi.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's true.
this semester will be online. Hopefully
Yeah,
next
yeah.
semester. Yeah.
Okay. I think participants are joining slowly. Very slow.
Only the organizer and the speakers are anxious.
So, should we start, sir? Because they will join
Yeah,
later
yeah, yeah.
on.
Let's begin. Yeah, we have to adhere to time.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So again, sir, once again, you are welcome in this FDP program of quantum computing. And very good morning to all of you who are present here. Professor Ravi Shankar is a professor of physics in the physics department at IIT Delhi. But to his credit, Professor Ravi Shankar called himself as a teacher in IIT Delhi. He got his PhD from University of Mysore after being a visiting fellow for about a year in TIFR Mumbai. He joined IIT Kanpur as a faculty member. He subsequently relocated to IIT Delhi in 2014, where he is currently working. His interests include quantum information, quantum chromodynamics, quantum Hall systems, and laser plasma interactions. So with this brief introduction about Professor Ravi Shankar, I welcome to this FDP program on quantum computing. So please, sir, you can continue your lecture.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. So, hello, good morning, all of you. At the outset, I should thank Professor Srivastava for asking me to share some things with you people. I should also like to congratulate the IIIT at Gwalior for organizing this, because especially in the area of quantum computation and quantum information, because this is one area where we think we know and we realize that we actually do not. There are many, many sophisticated areas, particle physics, quantum field theory, condensed matter physics, where people do very complicated things and they are technically involved, and one can sort of reconcile oneself that, okay, we do not know this, but the area of foundations of quantum mechanics, I should not use the word foundation, actually basic quantum mechanics or quantum information has many surprises in store for us. Well, they are all pleasant surprises, although initially it may be a little bit unnerving. So what I would like to do today is to try to present a few aspects of those things. I have been commissioned by Professor Srivastava to speak on the physics of quantum computers. Is that okay? So I immediately accepted, but probably it was a little bit rash, because as I started preparing, I discovered there are lots of layers and layers. Okay, but it is not too bad, because in some sense it also reflects the way our own understanding has evolved. Okay, so let me start sharing my.
May I request to everybody to open their videos? That would be more interactive session. If you open your videos, participants, please, I request you all. Yeah, good.
Okay, that is nice. I can see some faces and there will be more sense of participation, so that I'm not looking at the backboard ahead of me. Okay, thank you very much. So the title of the topic is Physics of Quantum Computers. Actually, I would make, there are some small amendments to this title, and there are some small clarifications also regarding the title. So please read off as for. Okay, Physics of Quantum Computers is a good title, but most of the time we are going to ask what is the kind of physics that is required for quantum computers. Although it is called quantum computer, I'm looking at quantum computation, and I'll come to that in a minute, what I mean by quantum computation. Okay. Somebody is going to speak, I think Vasan or somebody is going to speak on realization, physical realization of quantum computers. So I could have called it physics of quantum computation. Okay. At the outset, I should acknowledge two of my students, Suryansh and Rajni, who have helped me with some of the slides. And of course, they have been working with me for quite a while. There is another student called Shomik, and there was another Radha who have been working with me And interacting with these students and writing papers with them has quite nicely enriched my knowledge. And of course, here specific thanks to Suyansh and Rajni because of their help in preparation. Okay, you will see some nice pictures and all the credits go to them. Okay. So the proclamation is that we are going to interpret everything liberally. Okay. So for example, you say theoretical physics, but you don't mind listening to an experimentalist or a nuclear simulation person, so on and so forth, right? So when you speak of quantum computation, we have notions of classical and non-classical, correct? So we have the idea that there is something called classical computation, there is something called classical world, and there is something called classical physics, and we have something called quantum. So the first proclamation is that wherever I use the word classical, I mean it in its most general sense. So we have the notion of classical particles, whose dynamics are described by Newton's laws. Is that right? Then we have the notion of waves or fields. And thirdly, we have the notion of quantum probability, which is governed by Boolean logic. So when we do our electronics, when we study our electronics, we use them very nicely, and or not, and then they are universal symbols, and then you compare them, and then you relate them to the set theoretic relation. So that is what we have. There are corresponding counterparts in the quantum world. So you have the quantum particles, okay? So, and you have quantum probability, and you also have quantum fields, okay? So when I use the word particle, I should be very careful about what I mean, whether I am looking at a quantum particle or a classical particle. When I use the word wave, okay, wave is generally classical, but when I use the word field, I should worry about whether I'm looking at a quantum field or a classical field. And the notion of a quantum field is very intimately tied to the notion of a quantum particle. And then, of course, there is this very funny thing called quantum probability, which violates Boolean logic, which cannot be fit into the Kolmogorov framework. Whatever people study in courses in statistics and probability theory or classical information theory, so on and so forth. The precursor to all that is the old wave particle duality. So this is something that we have to remember. Okay. Now, what about quantum computation? Okay, so although I'm using the word quantum computation, we shall worry about both computation and information. Is that okay? So when I'm speaking of information, I'm imagining that there is a certain creation, there is a transmission, there is a manipulation. Is that okay? And we will also see there will be interrogation. In order to get information, you have to do something. You have to ask queries. That is what we have to do. So the question is, when we are looking at quantum information processing, how is it that we are going to encode the information? How are we going to store? How are we going to transmit? And how is the other person going to get the extract, whatever was intended to be, and at many times extract whatever is hidden. So when we are speaking of physics of quantum computers, all of them are some kind of computers because they are going to churn various things. Is that okay? These quantum states of some particular qubit or a higher multi-qubits. So we have all these in mind. So please remember these preliminaries and proclamation. Okay. So I will be reminded at some point, what time I have. Okay. So let us remember, this is going to be, all of you can relax and listen to me. There is going to be nothing very complicated. Actually, you have been introduced to fair nitty-gritty details and deep aspects of quantum computation in the first two lectures yesterday. I was watching Arun Pati, who gave a complete overview, and the next lecture to which delved into, the EPR correlations, etc., etc. This lecture is going to be quite, not going to be very taxing on you. Okay, but please do pay attention. Is that okay? Because there are a lot of interesting things. So since we are all the time speaking of quantum computation and we are saying that classical computers could not do this, I think there was a lot of mention, no cloning theorem, perfect security, etc., in yesterday's lecture. It is good to spend a few minutes worrying about what are the hallmarks of the classical world and what are the hallmarks of the quantum world. Okay. So the classical particles are localized, and the most important thing is that they have a finite number of degrees of freedom, correct? If you have a single particle in 3 dimensions, it will have 3 degrees of freedom. The phase space will be 6 dimension. The fields, classically speaking, have infinite number of degrees of freedom. So if you are going to look at, for example, the sound wave, it can have all possible frequencies and the most general sound wave. A wave packet that you consider will be a superposition of all possible frequencies. So the frequencies, your Fourier functions actually provide a basis for an expansion. The most important thing is that there is no question of superposition of states for particles. Now, when we speak of states, we have the notion of a pure state and a mixed state. Okay. Generally, it is not mentioned in classical physics, but it is mentioned only in quantum physics. So when I say that it's a pure state, by that I mean I know the position and momentum fully. Is that okay? When I say a mixed state, that means I don't know fully. I assign a probability like Maxwell-Bolton distribution or Fermi-Dirac or whatever. So when I'm looking at them, there is no question of superposition. I cannot say, the particle is a state is given by a superposition of it being found at x equal to x1 and x equal to x2. So correspondingly, when I look at the probability for finding a particle, the probabilities add, which is the basis actually of all of classical probability. Okay. But on the other hand, if you are going to look at waves, there is a superposition principle because they typically obey linear equations. Is that okay? Particles do not, except one particular case. Is that okay? So there is an interference because of the superposition, for which reason intensities do not add. That is a very important thing. Now, if you remember classical probability theory, we eventually get probabilities in an experimental situation by using the law of large numbers. So we perform a large number of experiments and then we look at the number count for each particular bin, divide it by the total number and we get the probability. Or if I go to the analog mode and not to the digital mode, it will be the intensity. So the important thing about waves is that there is an interference, for which reason the intensities do not add, but the amplitudes add. Is that okay? Of course, we should remember these amplitudes are observables. Is that okay? A sound amplitude is an observable. In principle, a light wave amplitude is also an observable, although it is very difficult because if you look at the visible light, it has a frequency of 10 to the power of 14 hertz. And where do I get a clock which can look at 10 to the power of minus 14 seconds? You need some femtosecond resolution and all that. Is that okay? So anyway, that is something that we have to remember. But the point is that rules of probability follow Boolean algebra. I'm not going to spend too much time on that, but we know what it means. Is that okay? Now, when we come to the quantum world, there is a curious inversion. Is that okay? It is not as if everything is thrown away, but there is some kind of an exchange of roles. States of particles obey superposition principle, whereas states of particles did not obey superposition principle. And there was the big problem of wave or matter in the classical world between Newton and Huygens, for example, whether light is a wave or light is matter. But here, there is another inversion. The quantization of fields give rise to quantum particles. Of course, these quantum particles are not to be confused with the properties that so-called classical particles have. States of fields obey superposition principle. So that is a common feature. Is that okay? So we have already written, unfortunately, it has been repeated, but never mind. But the most important thing is that quantum probability violates classical rules. Is that okay? They do not obey Boolean algebra. Now, this is something which was realized very early in the history of quantum mechanics. Around 1935-96, Birkhoff and Neumann wrote a beautiful paper called The Logic of Quantum Mechanics, which unfortunately today is largely forgotten, where they made this point and they did a very beautiful analysis. Is that okay? And that was very interesting because Kolmogorov axiomatized classical probability around the same time, 1934-35, and lo and behold, people had actually discovered, physicists, not mathematicians, okay? They had discovered a new probability theory, which we do not understand even now. And how do I know that they disobey classical rules? I'll come to that in a minute. But the important thing is that quantum states also exhibit, okay, something which classical particle states do not exhibit, and that is non-locality / entanglement. I have not been very honest here in the last line. I should have put non-locality entanglement in quotation marks because I'm going to spend some time on that. Is that okay? So let us remember that there is a duality. All of it is very loosely put in the word wave-particle duality, but in a more profound way, we can call that as a particle field duality, which is all about what quantum field theory or quantum world is. Okay. Now, what do we mean by saying that the classical probability rules are violated? Okay. I should make a few more statements about whatever I'm going to share with you, now. This talk is intended to be a precursor for all the lectures that you are going to hear, where you will get a lot of details about gates, circuits, quantum algorithms, realizations, teleportation, super dense coding, etc., etc., etc. I mean, I looked at the whole list of talks. Is that okay? So I'm not going to get into the depth of any of those things. Is that okay? But hopefully I will set some kind of a stage where you people will be able to appreciate what is being done in a more technical manner in those talks. Is that okay? That is what we have. So I use the word quantum world. Is that okay? So let us give an example. Is that okay? So look at the operator X. So that way you also start getting introduced to the notation. In quantum information, the Pauli spin operator sigma X is denoted by X, sigma Y is denoted by Y, and sigma Z is denoted by Z. So these are called Pauli operators or Pauli gates. Is that okay? So suppose I look at the outcome of X. What is the outcome of an observable? The possible outcomes of an observable are the eigenvalues. That is what Max Born taught us in the probability interpretation. And everybody knows the outcome of X or sigma X are plus minus 1. Their eigenvalues are plus or minus 1. And similarly, the outcome of another observable Y or sigma Y are again plus minus 1. I am having a spin-half particle in mind, if you like a so-called qubit. Is that okay? X and Y are independent observables. I cannot express X in terms of Y or Y in terms of X. Is that okay? So classically speaking, if something has an outcome plus minus 1, if another outcome has values plus minus 1, if I look at their sum, what should be the allowed values? The allowed values will go all the way from plus 2 to minus 2. For example, plus 1 will give me 2, minus 1 will give me 2, and then you have plus minus 1 giving me 0, minus 1 giving me 0, and so forth. But my world of quantum is murky because when I construct the observable X plus Y, the outcomes are plus or minus root 2. Is that okay? The outcomes are plus or minus root 2 because the eigenvalues of X plus Y are plus or minus root 2. So normally when people speak of, for example, Bell CSHH violation in non-locality, you will hear a lot about that. There is a classical limit on a particular correlation which is given by 2, and you say quantum world violates it and it exceeds that. It need not always exceed that. Actually, you need not go to very complicated examples to understand how classical probability rules violate. Is that okay? So I call it anti-Gestalt. There was a great psychologist called Gestalt. There is also something called Gestalt therapy. I don't know how many of you know. And Gestalt made the great statement, the sum is greater than the whole is greater than the sum of parts. Here, the whole is less than the sum of the parts. Is that okay? That is what we have. Therefore, you see, in this a very, very elementary manner, you are able to see that the rules of quantum probability are very different from the rules of classical probability. And why is that so? Although X and Y are independent of each other, represented as observables, they do not commute with each other. Represented operators, they do not commute with each other, and that is what we have. Now, what is the common feature between the classical world and the quantum world? I think yesterday you people heard about quantum supremacy. Is that right? Nobody can beat, it is the emperor of the world or the empress of the world, right? But actually, when it comes to experiments, and experimentalists are the people whom we have to respect and we have to deal with them with great caution. Your theorists may make any statement, but an experiment is going to tell us what nature is. Is that right? There is a supremacy of number count. Is that okay? Whether you are doing classical physics or whether you are doing quantum mechanics, is that okay? Ultimately, what will the experiment do? Experimentalists do, the experimentalists are going to do some number counts. Is that okay? How many of them are here? How many of them are there? And the experimentalist is going to give you all the results in sums of number counts. Imagine a scattering experiment. How many particles got scattered at this particular angle, at this particular energy? That is the question that we are asking. The underlying may be a classical Rutherford scattering or a quantum Rutherford scattering, it doesn't matter. Is that okay? That means all predictions are verified by the law of large numbers. I'm making this statement not in a very vain way. I'm going to use this in a very, very particular context. So please take that seriously. And remember again, when I go from digital to the analog, are you getting the point? From the discrete to the continuum, the so-called law of large numbers becomes comparative intensities. Is that okay? Comparative intensities. That is what we do. In fact, the abuse of language is so great. People say, you send ordinary light and you are being detected, you say the number of photons is this much. Although it is a completely classical light, and classical light does not have a fixed number of photons, they are speaking the language of some mean number of photons, which has a very large fluctuation, right? So we happily move from the notion of particles to intensities through some kind of a discretization, although it is not physically exact. This is something that we should remember, because this is what throws the hammer in the spokes. Is that okay? That is what it is. Now, let us ask what is happening with classical communication and classical computation. Well, computation is with particles, bits. So we call it digital. There is no surprising about that, because all computation is counting in this way or counting that way. You add, you subtract, you multiplicate, you divide. Is that okay? People started counting with their fingers, and fingers are called digits. Is that right? That is my digitalization. And if you look at the evolution of the animal world, is that okay? Including humans, the communication has always been with waves, sound waves. That is what we've been doing. Of course, nowadays, communication storages are also through bits. We want to digitize everything, because everything is under your control. You can manipulate, you can morph, you can do anything that you want. So for the time being, if you forget the fact that communication has been largely through waves, it is as if that we are doing everything in terms of bits, whether it is communication, whether it is computation, whether it is information storage, etc., etc. We are doing everything through bits. So apparently, our universe itself is made of bits. So there is this gentleman called Seth Lloyd who imagined, that the whole universe is made of quantum bits, and he wrote a paper in Physical Review Letter sometime in 1980s, late 1980s, saying that how many computations has our universe made ever since the Big Bang. So these notions are all very attractive. Is that okay? And they are interesting to entertain. They are interesting to entertain. These are our natural modes. So because we have moved from the regime of the analog to the bits, is that okay? We tend to analyze everything in terms of the bits. Is that okay? We tend to analyze everything in terms of the bits, and we ask ourselves, what is it that we can do? What is it that a bit cannot do? And what is it that a quantum bit can do? You understand that, right? Let me repeat. When I'm saying that I will go from a bit to a qubit, what I'm assuming is that I'm going to do all my computation. I'm going to do all my information processing. Is that right? Writing a letter to you, or talking to you over a phone, sending you a telegram, whatever, writing an email. I'm assuming that all of it is going to be done by bits. And I ask myself, are there generalizations of bits such that I can manipulate and I can do things with them which cannot be done with them? And therefore, we have a very powerful slogan which was given, by people who started looking at the concept of quantum computation. David Deutsch is, of course, the pioneer. So we have the slogan: you replace bit by qubits. I have put this Q and U in italics. Is that right? Because it's supposed to stand for quantum bits. Is that okay? So what we do is to replace the two values 0, 1 by an arbitrary superposition. I'm going to construct a corresponding state, A0 plus B1. And by the very nature of quantum mechanics, E and B take complex values, mod A squared plus mod B squared. So a bit apparently can hold only two pieces of information, whereas now the information is contained in, let us say, A and B. That is what I have. Therefore, there is a lot more information. Because this is a very powerful slogan, and because much of the development in quantum information has been driven by that, this is exactly the thing that merits a lot of scrutiny. Is that okay? This is exactly the thing that merits a lot of scrutiny. Von Neumann claimed to have proved that quantum mechanics does not allow for hidden variable description. Is that hello? And that is exactly what was carefully scrutinized by David Bohm. And again, the EPR correlations were very carefully scrutinized by Bell. You get the point, right? So what appears very natural and simple, they are the ones which merits careful scrutiny. So please remember them. Okay. I have to keep track of my time. Okay. So the plan is that I look at the preparation of the state, I look at the manipulation of the state, I look at the diagnostics, and I look at the measurement. Is that okay? So I have laid the foundation in the last 20 minutes or so, whatever. Now I'm going to take example by example and tell you where exactly we need the so-called quantum computation. Are we understanding that where exactly we need quantum computation? And that is what we start with. So the hierarchy is that First, I will look at only the superposition of states. So what do I mean by that? I will look at the bit 0, 1 getting replaced by A0 plus B1. That is the first layer. Is that okay? Of course, if I have a lot of qubits, I'll call them as a multi-qubit state. If each of them is individually undergoing superposition of states, it is still superposition because one of them is not talking to the other. Is that okay? They are not talking to the other. The next layer is entanglement, where what I will do is, there is a typo here, 0, 0 and 1, 1. Suppose you have two values 0, 0 and 1, 1. I will now replace it by a 0, 0 plus B1, 1. Is that okay? A 0, 0 plus B1, 1. Everybody knows what entanglement is. I am not going to spend any time. And moreover, our erudite colleague Arul is going to tell you a lot about that. Is that okay? So if it is sufficient for our purposes, if you know this much, A00 plus B11, that will be my entanglement. That is the second layer. This entanglement is what shocked Schrodinger and Einstein, Podolsky, Rosen to no end. But I make a distinction between the entanglement also. The two qubits which are sitting there, imagine two spin-half particles, they may be spatially very close to each other, or they may be very, very far away from each other, which I have denoted by a cartoon below. What do I mean by far away from each other? By far away, I mean, it is if Alice makes a measurement on her qubit and Bob makes a measurement on his qubit, the signal will not travel from one to the other by the time they have performed their measurement. This is non-locality. I'm going to look at these three layers, and I'm going to look at a lot of quantum computation and information processing. So actually, I could ask if there are any questions at this particular point, and then I can proceed. Are there any questions?
Sir, just can you please explain that Bob and Alice, what you said just now?
So imagine you have an entangled state A00 plus B11. Is that okay? The first index refers to Alice, the second refers to Bob. You get the point, right? 0, 0 means the first qubit is in the 0 state, second qubit is in 0 state, 1, 1 means the same thing. Now the two qubits are separated from each other. You get the point, right? So imagine that there is a source and it emitted two spin-half particles and they have moved. Now let us say Alice makes a measurement at some time and Bob makes a measurement at some time. You get the point, right? Now what is the minimum time required for the information that Alice has made a measurement to reach Bob? If the distance is d, the minimum time that is required is d by c, because c is the maximum speed. You get the point, right? But if they make measurements before that elapsation of time, the two measurements are independent of each other. That is what we call non-locality. Is that okay? That
yes,
means
sir,
yes. One measurement is not causally related to another. So now you see there can be an entanglement where there can be a possible causal connection. Another thing is there can be no causal connection. You get the point, right? So I want to make a distinction between these three quote unquote quantum features, and I want to see what happens. So we have gates, and I already told you what they are. So imagine that my initial state is a string of 0, 0, 0, 0. That is what I have written, n qubits. Is that right? That is what I call as the input register, and I perform a unitary transformation. I get the most general state, because what is a gate by definition? Any arbitrary unitary transformation is a gate. So for example, for a single qubit, there are only two gates, identity or not, whereas for a qubit, there are an infinite number of gates. Now I say a gate is a local transformation if that unitary transformation is a direct product of individual unitary transformation. U1 acts on the first qubit, U2 acts on the second qubit, UN acts on the nth qubit. Then that is a local transformation. Non-local means it cannot be written that particular way. What is a good example? A C0 gate is a very good example, because a C0 gate acting on a factorizable state can actually produce a entangled state. So what C0 does is to create an interaction between the qubits. Are you getting the point? C0 creates an interaction between the qubits, whereas unitary gates are like external magnetic fields. One magnetic field acts on one spin, another magnetic acts on other spin, so on and so forth. So please keep that in mind. So with this example, the next 1 hour or 45 minutes, with this preparation, I'm going to look at a whole lot of examples. Now, the first example of a quantum advantage was developed by Deutsch, which was later improved by Deutsch-Jozsa algorithm. Is that okay? Deutsch, in fact, gave a slogan, gave a proclamation, and he said that everybody does computer science as if computer science is dictated by law of mathematics. That is correct. Computers are physical instruments, therefore their behavior should be dictated by law of physics. I can give an example to you. If you look at the way you were taught error analysis in our, let us say, 10th standard, 11th standard, 12th standard, they are taught as a part of some applied mathematics, some probability theory. But actually, we know that it is not that. Everything is dictated by law of physics because there is something called the speed of light. So you cannot transmit information. There is something called the uncertainty principle and so forth. And that tells me what the error analysis is. You get the point, right? In a similar manner, Deutsch said what it is. And what does Deutsch say? Deutsch says that there is a black box here which is going to do some very nice thing. Is that okay? This is actually the model of a quantum computer. So what happens? There are two input registers. There is an X and Y. X is the control qubit. Y is the target qubit. What happens? X comes, Y comes, and Y will give rise by some function of X, and out comes X, Y plus IX. So the great achievement of Deutsch is that he gave us a model of a quantum operation, which can be completely invertible. Of course, it is invertible because it can go through another fellow where it will become Y plus F of X minus F of X. I get my original state. Is that okay? That means all gate operations are completely invertible. This is the model. Now, what are these Fs? That is the question that I have to ask. So in the Deutsch case, this is a black box. Is that okay? And this black box modifies X into something else. For example, it doesn't do any modification at all. 0 goes to 0, X equal to 0, X equal to. So the first function is like this. Okay, I should be careful. The first function is 0 goes to 0, 1 goes to 0. In the second case, 0 goes to 0 and 1 goes to 1. In the third case, 0 goes to 1 and 1 goes to 0. The fourth case, 0 goes to 1 and 1 goes to 1. You get the point, right? Because it's a 0, 1 to 0, 1 mapping. There are 4 possible functions. Now, if I go back and I look upon this as a classical box, you ask the question, I want to know what this box is doing. The box is implementing one of the functions. Everybody should get that. The box is implementing one of those 4 functions. How do I determine what those function is? What will you say? Okay, I will send my 0. I will look at my output. I will send my 1. I will look at my output. Therefore, 2 queries. We are interrogating the system. I am not allowed to open this black box. I am interrogating the system. 2 queries tell me whether the function is F0 or F1 or F2 or F3. Whether it is classical or quantum mechanical, that is the situation. Now, I will become a little bit more, I will not ask for precise information. I will ask for a more modest information. I will say, look at F0 and F3. F0 and F3 correspond to constant functions because both of them are taking the same value. F1 and F2 correspond to non-constant function. They are called balanced because one of them goes to 1 and another goes to 0. Now I come and tell you, please tell me whether it is constant or not. I don't want to make a distinction between F0 and F3. I don't want to make a distinction between F1 and F2. Again, classically, you say, I can't help you. You measure 0. What happens to 0? You have to measure what happens to 1. Then what is going to happen? Then what is going to happen is that you have to make 2 queries, whether you ask a more probing question or a less probing question. Classically, there is no advantage. Well, this black box requires quantum entanglement, and I'm showing you. This is your C0 gate. Okay, this is the symbol for the C0 gate that I'm making, but I'm not interested in that. All that I know is that it is a quantum device. I'm only interested in the interrogation. Are you people understanding that? I'm only interested in the interrogation. Is that okay? I missed a slide. I am really sorry. Is that okay? Okay, I missed the slide. I am really sorry about that. Is that okay? So what I will do is, there is a corresponding generalization. Is that okay? There is a corresponding generalization. Let me explain that. Now what will happen? I will not send a single qubit state, but I will take a n qubit state. Is that okay? Again, this is my black box. I have already explained to you. I will not send a single qubit state. I will send a multi-qubit state. Is that okay? Now I will tell you, this multi-qubit state will either go to a constant function or a balanced function. That means what? Half of them will go take value 0, half of them will take value 1. That is what I am going to ask you. Constant means all of them will take value 0, all of them will take you 1. Now you see, if I have n bits, there are 2 to the power of n possibilities. So if you ask a classical query, you have to make at least half of the measurement to answer. Typically, the worst case scenario. Now dots tells me that this can be answered by performing this particular thing. You will learn that in a great detail. What is it that you have to focus on? The thing that you have to focus on is that there is a Hadamard gate here, there is a Hadamard gate here, and there is a Hadamard gate here. And what does h multiplied n means? A Hadamard is operating on each of those gates, each of those qubits. Are you people understanding that Hadamard is operating on each of the qubits? So now you count, if there is an n bit state, how many Hadamards do I require? There is a n, there is a n, 2n plus 1. Are you people understanding that there are 2n plus 1? Whereas classically, if you had made a query, in order to find out whether it is balanced or especially to find out whether it is constant, if you don't get a constant function, is that okay? The worst case is 2 to the power of n, and 2 to the power of n is exponentially larger than compared to n. Is that okay? So Dots Jozsa tells me that I have a great quantum advantage. You are understanding that? Now notice the important point that I'm making is that this is a black box. I don't care how that quantum device was made. I am only using the principle of superposition because I am taking at the product of Hadamard gates, U1, U cross U cross U cross U. So I am using the principle of superposition. I am making a query and I am able to answer that question in a very beautiful way. Okay. Now I will go back to my previous slides and I ask the question, if you are using the principle of superposition, did I really need a quantum bit? Do you have to look at some electron spin or anything? The answer lies in the bias of the beholder. Remember what I told you, we always have the tendency to go from bits to qubits. That is, we imagine that there is a particle because you are given the example, a coin is tossed, or something is there, something is there. But remember, there are something called coupled oscillators. Is that okay? What happens in the case of coupled oscillators? If you have n coupled oscillators, you have n modes. And what is the most general state of the modes? An arbitrary superposition of all those modes. Therefore, you have a principle of superposition when you have n coupled oscillators. Well, in the limit n goes to infinity and you take the spacing between the oscillators 0, it becomes a wave, correct? Then that means in principle, I should be able to interrogate that black box. You get the point, right? Somebody is planning something diabolical in the black box. I want to interrogate. You really do not need a quantum system because the so-called quote unquote qubit, that degree of freedom can be provided even by waves. Is that okay? What I will do? I will make use of my polarization. For example, I will look at the horizontal degree of polarization, the vertical degree of polarization given a given direction. I construct the most linear combination. You get the point, right? And I can make a superposition of such fellows. So employment of polarization can do the job. And as an example, I have told you there is a beautiful paper in 2015. Is that okay? Where they have actually implemented that. So please remember, although we use the word quantum, this one, in many, many cases where only the principle of superposition is required, you can happily do the wave computation. A wave, of course, is not a bit. You get the point, right? It obeys the principle of superposition. So that is the first lesson that we have to learn. Okay. Now I will flash a large number of algorithms for you people because I really don't want to spend too much time. There is something called a Simon's period finding algorithm. Suppose f of x equal to f of x plus a. Okay, there are n bits or n qubits, and I construct a function of them and they are periodic functions. How do I find my a? Simon gave this circuit. Again, you see, I'm only using products of Hadamard gates. Again, this is a black box. I'm doing an interrogation. You know, you should imagine there is a terrorist or somebody who has put something in a box. You cannot open it for the fear of explosion. Therefore, you have to do the art of what is that called non-demolitional testing. Non-invasive testing is what you are doing without disturbing this black box. And we are asking when I am doing non-invasive testing, do I need entanglement or do I not? The answer is I do not need entanglement. You see that? Because this is a product of single qubit gates. This is a product of single qubit gates. Again, even this can be in principle understood entirely in terms of the superposition of pairs. This is Bernstein-Vazirani algorithm where you add numbers bit by bit. Is that okay? X dot S. I don't have to spend too much time on that. This can again be implement in terms of the superposition of the waves. Is that okay? In fact, the most celebrated of the search algorithms, and that is Grover's algorithm. People say, if a quantum computer is built, the first computation will be done will be the implementation of Schwar's algorithm, and the first search algorithm will be done by Grover. Grover's achievement is enormous. Is that okay? Again, you have a black box which is sitting here, and Grover tells you that with a quadratic speed up, you are able to actually search, and you want to find, you can find whatever you wanted. Again, what does Grover use? Grover uses only a series of Hadamards. Hadamards are really, very precious jewels. Is that okay? Which are not even very difficult to implement. Is that okay? You simply create equal superpositions of 0 and 1. That is what you're doing. So in principle, even the most famous algorithm, okay, Grover's algorithm can be done by using classical superposition of waves. That is something that we have to remember. But then, by practice, we call all of this to be quantum computation. Please remember that. This is something. Grover has a very important lesson for us, because in one of his lectures, he said that he was not a physics student. He was an electrical student in IIT Delhi. He attended a lecture, a basic lecture on quantum mechanics. He heard the word superposition. It had stuck somewhere in mind. Probably he forgot everything else, hydrogen atom, harmonic oscillator, and all that. And that was enough for him to come up with the algorithm. So the question is not how much we learn, but how much we can put to use whatever we learn. Okay. Now I ask the question, where do I need entanglement then? That brings us to the question, what is a quantum computer? Remember physics of quantum computer. Normally, for some reason, nobody mentions how to add. Is that okay? You want to add numbers. If I know how to add numbers, I know how to subtract. I know how to multiply. I know how to subtract, and I know how to divide. Correct? That is what it is. So this is a picture of a quantum full adder. Is that okay? That is, you have a string of numbers, A0, A1, A2, AN, B0, B1, B2, Bn. You add them. Is that okay? And there is a carry over. So you see, here you have control, not gate. These are called Toffoli gates. You get the point, right? If you want to build a proper quantum computer, you cannot do with the principle of superposition. You better use what? These entangled gates. Is that okay? Again, I'm sure somebody who is going to discuss gates, Sunil Mishra or somebody, will tell you how to implement this thing, or you can look up any book. So at last we are happy. Okay, entanglement as a use. Is that okay? Entanglement as a use, and that is in my adding machine. So multiplication is nothing but adding a large number of times the same thing. Division is the complement of addition. I will not get into that. Is that okay? So here, not only am I making use of the principle of superposition, because I'm going to do some, there must be some, I'm doing a NOT operation and things like that. I'm also making use of the entanglement. Therefore, we can now legitimately say a quantum computer is a genuine quantum device which cannot be implemented by waves. So far, is that okay? Which cannot be implemented by waves. There is something here. Now I come to the other very, very famous algorithm, and that is the so-called quantum Fourier transform. Remember, I showed you a primitive version of Simon's algorithm. Is that okay? Now, this is a very genuine period finding algorithm. Imagine what I'm going to have. There is a very, very complicated wave pattern. Is that okay? Function. And it is not a sinusoidal wave. The period is extraordinarily complicated. The function is extraordinarily complicated. And I'm asking the question, I don't want to know what the function is. I only want to know what the period is. These are hard problems in quantum computation. Are you understanding that these are hard problems in quantum computation? Shor discovered something called quantum Fourier transform, where he showed that you can actually find the period with an exponential speed up. Is that okay? That is, you take the logarithm of the time. So if I suppose I give you a very complicated function with some period, is that okay? If a classical algorithm will take a time t, a quantum algorithm, a quantum Fourier transform, the same thing to implement will take time log t. So imagine 10 to the power of 4 years and 4 log 10 years. So the first one can never be implemented in the lifetime of 100 generations, but this can be probably implemented in my own lifetime. You get the point, right? That is the power of the exponential speed up. And again, you see, you have a lot of control gates. Wherever there is a control gate, there is an entanglement of a very sophisticated variety. Are you understanding that? Everything can be built from the C0 gate. C0 is the minimum currency. And therefore, again, this is a part of a quantum computation. again we find that we actually need entanglement. So some superposition, I have gone to the entanglement, and this is a picture which gives you the Schwarz algorithm. Now, why is factorization important? I should take a minute and I should tell you. The person who worried the most about factorization was none other than Gauss. Everyone has heard of Gauss, right? He is called the prince among mathematicians. Gauss said the very dignity of the problem demands that we find out how to factorize numbers, because multiplication is easiest, factorization is the most difficult. Of course, it has a practical advantage because all our nowadays electronic transmission, transaction that we do with our credit cards, etc., is based on the fact, the so-called RSA, this one, is based on the fact that factorizing very large numbers is very, very tough. If we can implement Schwarz algorithm on a quantum computer, then factorization becomes very, very easy. Then all your RSA protocols, etc., they will become not that secure, and it will be very easy for people to crack our encryption. Is that okay? That is the whole problem. So there is a practical advantage also. Again, you see, we need entanglement. How much time do I have? 10:14. My lecture is still 11, no? Professor Srivastav?
Yes, sir, it's 11, up to 11.
Oh, then I go a little bit slowly. Okay. So, however, there is a twist in the tail. Is that okay? Why is there a twist in the tail? And I will tell you a few stories. Is that okay? Now, suppose I give you two vector spaces of the same dimension. Imagine two vector spaces of 3 dimensions. Is that okay? One may correspond to momentum and another may correspond to position. Physically, they are representing two different physical systems, but mathematically, they are completely identical to each other. You get the point, right? Whatever operation you do here, that same operation you will do there. Whatever you are going to, inner product you are going to take here, the same inner product you are going to do there. There are 3 orthonormal vectors here. There are 3 orthonormal vectors there. Corresponding to every operator here, there is a corresponding operator. You construct a unitary operator, there is a unitary operator. Construct a Hermitian operator, construct a Hermitian operator, over there. That is to say, with respect to the vector space and the algebra operated on the vectors, the two vector spaces are isomorphic. It is the physics that tells us, hey, look at this, this represents position, this represents momentum. Actually, it need not even be that. It can even be the vector space of colors. Red, blue, green, they form 3 basis vectors in the vector space of colors. They form a vector space. In fact, that is the reason why the response of our eyes and the response of ears are completely different. Our ears have this cilia, whatever the small hair, they actually perform a Fourier transform of the sound waves. But my eyes are not able to, my rods and cones are not able to perform Fourier transform. What they do is color mixing. You get the point, right? That is why, they look very differently in the night time, they different look in the dark. So when people go to buy clothes, it's a big problem actually, because how they look in the shop and how they look when you bring it back at home. Correct? Everybody knows that. Or how you send a WhatsApp message, to your spouse or whoever it is. It looks completely different because it's a vector space. You get the point, right? And in the vector space, once you give me the vector, you don't know what it is. But my Fourier transform does that. This kind of an isomorphism extends to even infinite dimensions. So in some sense, the one-dimensional harmonic oscillator, that is infinite dimensional because you have infinite number of energy states. The 3-dimensional hydrogen atom, that is infinite dimensional, but that is in 3 dimensions. They may appear to be completely different, but actually I can write an isomorphism between those 2 spaces. I am making this statement because people speak of 2 qubit states, correct? 2 spin-half particles, and that is described by a 4-dimensional vector space. Why? I have 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, 1, 1, and a linear combination. But somebody will come and say, I have a spin 3/2 particle. Are you people getting the point? My spin 3/2 particle also has 4 states. 3/2, half, minus 3/2. And immediately, somebody comes and says, hey, mathematically speaking, these 2 are isomorphic to each other. What you are calling as a C0 gate, there is an analog here. What you are calling as a Hadamard gate, there is an analog here, etc., so on and so forth. Is that okay? Therefore, we have to ask ourselves the question, it is very, very important, how quantum is entanglement? Are you people understanding that? How quantum is entanglement? And in order to answer that, we shall look at the characteristics of radiation. Sound wave is not a very good analogy. Light is a very good analogy. So let us go back to class 12 and ask ourselves what is we learned about light. There are two things that we learned about light. One was that I could have a monochromatic plane wave. Is that okay? It is an idealization, but never mind about that. But it is also transverse, correct? And what does transversality mean? The transversality means that the electric field and the magnetic field lie perpendicular to the plane of propagation, and therefore there are 2 degrees of freedom, and that those 2 degrees of freedom are called polarization. The direction of the electric field is called the polarization. Remember, we have a principle of superposition for light waves. You can keep on adding. That is how we produce all the Gaussian light pulses, chirped laser pulses, so on and so forth. That is what we have. So if you look at the polarization and the wave vector, they form a basis vector. You get the point, right? How many such basis vectors are there? K will take continuous values. Kx will go from minus infinity to infinity, etc., etc. My polarization is a 2-dimensional vector space because my electric field can be in any direction. For example, it can be horizontal or horizontal or vertical, or right circular or left circular polarization. Therefore, now I can employ an abstract notation. Is that okay? So at any given time, if I write the field as E naught sine k dot r, that is my electric field, right? For the radiation, my E naught is perpendicular to k. I can employ without any committing any mistake as a kp, the abstract vector kp, written in the position basis. You can also write it in the momentum basis. Then this fellow will become a sum of 2 delta functions. Fourier transform of sine is a delta function. Now you see there are 2 degrees of freedom. You get the point, right? That is to say, every plane wave, every polarized plane wave is characterized by 2. I wrote multiple C numbers. Normally we speak of quantum numbers. Q numbers are eigenvalues. Even a classical wave is characterized by 2 numbers. Now I say, why not I construct a superposition of 2 such plane waves? The first fellow is coming with K1 P1 with a coefficient A. Again, I apologize for this B. The second fellow is coming with K2B with a coefficient P. Now I invite all of you and ask you, vector space wise, can I distinguish this from an entangled state? The answer is mathematically no. If that indeed be the case, I should be able to do quantum computation with classical waves. Are there any objections to that? I would like to wait for a minute and ask you if there are any questions. Who can stop us? Okay. So before I proceed, I should make some statements though. At vector spaces and as vectors, they are indistinguishable mathematically. Physically, they are eminently distinguishable. If I wrote my expansion for a state is not an observable. What is observable is always a bilinear quantity. It is the probability that is an observable. Probability amplitudes are not observable. Nobody says measure the wave function. But if I write this kind of a wave, you can bring your electrometer, you can bring a test charge, you can actually measure the magnitude of the electric field and magnetic field correctly. Are you people getting the point? That is the most important thing. That is to say, the amplitude of a classical wave is observable, but the amplitude of a quote unquote quantum wave, what de Broglie thought, and now it is a probability amplitude, is not an observable. Statement number 1. That is something that you have to remember. Classically, quantum mechanics, yes, yeah, somebody has a question? Otherwise, please mute yourselves. Is that okay? Quantum mechanically, when I write A and B, they are inherently probabilistic. People understand that. They are inherently probabilistic. That is a fundamental probability. It has nothing to do with my ignorance. Classically, when I write A and B, they give me the strength of the amplitude. They are measurable. However, if I use the law of large number, yes, there is a disturbance going on. Please don't do that. But if I look at mod A squared and mod B squared, A and B are measurable. But if you look at mod A squared and mod B squared, they give me relative intensities in these 2 modes. Quantum mechanically, they give me the relative probabilities in the 2 modes. And remember, I said supremacy of number counting. Is that okay? When the experimentalist measures, well, either you can look at the relative intensity or you can look at the probability. Both of them will be by measure of large numbers. Therefore, it is not always easy to distinguish quantum probability from classical relative intensities. We should remember that for the simple reason that, for example, people say that we have single photon interference. We got that by decreasing the intensity of light so low that at any given time on an average only a single photon was traveling. That is not exactly correct, because however low the intensity may be, in principle that amplitude is classically measurable. So when you read something about single photon interference double slit experiments, please do not take them completely at their face value. Please do not take them literally. Therefore, the question is, can we perform quantum computation with classical waves? The point is that we have introduced classical entanglement. So it is amazing that for a long time, it took a long time for people to think of classical entanglement. Because I remember that in early 2000, when I was myself getting into a field, I was giving a set of lectures in Raman Research Institute. I even wrote this and I convinced myself, no. This is not going to qualify for entanglement because I am going to measure these amplitudes are observable. Is that okay? So that is the fear of taking things into logical conclusion. You get the point, right? That is the prejudice. You know, there is the famous parity violation experiment. Madam Wu and al. Did the experiment. Apparently, lots of others had also seen that longitudinal polarization, but they did not have the courage to publish it. They thought there is something wrong with their measurement because they thought, how can parity be violated? You get the point, right? But a classical entanglement is possible. Now, if I can have classical entanglement with 2 degrees of freedom, I can have classical entanglement with any number of degrees of freedom. Actually, my classical waves are even superior to quantum mechanical waves. I will tell you quantum mechanical particles, because manipulating 2 qubits or manipulating spin 3/2, spin 5/2, spin 7/2 is all very tough. Where am I going to get that? If you can look at nuclear states, you know, I think my boron is in a spin 3 state or some such thing. Who is going to manipulate all those things? In yesterday's lecture, you must have read how complicated it is to do NMR quantum computation, correct? I think that was the lecture about, right? Quantum information processing. But now I will say, I will not look at polarization, I will look at orbital angular momentum states. My light can carry orbital angular momentum, right? R cross E cross B, and you make a multipole expansion. When you make a multipole expansion in the paraxial approximation, now my light can possess polarization, local polarization, and also orbital angular momentum. And everybody knows what the allowed values of orbital angular momentum are. It has nothing to do with quantum mechanics. It's simply multipole expansion. Like you make multipole expansion for electrostatics. Correct? Monopole, dipole, quadrupole, octupole, so on and so forth. So L equal to 0, 1, 2, 3, minus 1, minus 2, minus 3, so on and so forth. So I can even build a QNIT. What does N stand for? There are N bits and their generalization. So I ask myself, is it possible to create such states? Is it possible to create such classical states? So the big question is it somebody's pipe dream? Is it my fantasy, or is it really possible? That is the question that we are asking. Okay. So the answer is, okay, people have actually been able to implement source algorithm in a very, very limited context. Is that okay? In a very, very limited context, using classical entanglement. So this is a picture which all of you should see. There is an input beam, there are mirrors, there are beam splitters, there is an out beam, there are mirrors. A completely optical system using completely optical apparatus. The beam is classical, half wave plate is classical, beam splitter is classical. Actually, people have indeed implemented source algorithm. But I was telling you, there are entangles, there is entanglement, there is a Toffoli gate, there is this gate and all that. You are able to do that because what it essentially does is to make use of the classical entanglement. Is that okay? That is something, example. I apologize that I have actually not given the credit. It should be a very nice paper which people should read, but it somehow slipped from our mind. How does it look like? How does the quantum thing look like? So here is a nice intensity distribution. So what you do is, if you had single photons, you would all collect them and convert it into intensities, and you can make it analog. Here I have classical entanglement, and this is the cartoon picture. Is that okay? This is the cartoon. So again, you see, you have the quarter wave plate. This is the right circular polarization. And these are orbital angular momentum states. Is that okay? And these are, I don't know what they are called, some spatial modulators or whatever. Is that okay? So the question is, Quantum mechanically, in order to know entanglement, I was measuring the correlations, correct? Quantum, classically, how am I going to know that whether it is an entangled state at all? You don't have to do anything at all, no correlation, anything. You see, simply look at the intensity pattern. You get the point, right? So you see, this intensity pattern is very different from this intensity pattern. So presumably, this was unentangled. It went through all these quarter Q plates and etc. etc. And lo and behold, out came a nicely entangled orbital angular momentum beam. This is another particular example. So people call this single shot. For example, my colleague in Kanpur, he wrote a beautiful paper on how to perform such single shot experiments. And don't think that these experiments are done only in a few places in the world. My colleague in IIT Delhi, Senthil, actually has very beautiful setups to study orbital angular momentum light waves together with polarization, and they create fantastic topological states, actually, vortex states, lemon states, so on and so forth. So they are not outlandish. So they say Hale experiments. Is that okay? Once the experiments are done, no theorist can hide under any such thing. So this is an example. So there are other examples. All of us are familiar with the Bell states, right? 0, 0 plus 1, 1, 0, 1 plus 1, 0, 0, 0 minus 1, 1, 0, 1 minus 1, 0. So these are the examples. The intensities would look like that. Therefore, you should be able to implement all that I wrote about. What are the things that I wrote about? Arithmetic operation, quantum Fourier transform, addition. You get the point, right? You are doing an addition. Schwartz algorithm, factorization, in fact, whole quantum computer, provided, in fact, in principle, a whole quantum computer which is compact can be built entirely out of classical entangled systems. Light is an example. There is no limit to what nature can afford us in terms of other degrees of freedom. Is that okay? You can even consider, topological objects, solitonic waves, which remain dispersion free and which do not decay with time, which maintain their coherence. You should be able to do that. So we have come back full circle. Is that okay? We have come back full circle, and we can say we thought entanglement is the hallmark of quantum computation. Not necessarily so. You can even do that. So what we have done in all this is to actually construct a dictionary. What we have done is we have created a triality. People speak of duality, probability, number count, intensity. You get the point, right? That is how the experimentalist does that. We are going to make use of that. Is that okay? And that is what we are going to get. In fact, you can have a completely nice polarized wave, completely full polarization. You can take their superposition, and then you can do an average over the momentum degree of freedom, and you will get a density matrix. Is that okay? The so-called Stokes parameter. I'm sure that Arul may be touching upon them because there is a full talk on entanglement. Is that okay? And the density matrix of the Stokes parameter is indistinguishable from the density matrix for a quantum spin-half particle, say electron. You get the point, right? That is what we are employing here. So even that can be done. In fact, our students played a game and they even showed that even do quantum machine learning. There is a classical machine learning which can be generalized to quantum machine learning. This is the hint topic. So I can even give you a hint in order to be successful in life. If you want to do quantum computation, work on quantum machine learning, everyone will jump at it, however simple it may be. You get the point, right? You work on understanding entanglement. The subject is so mature, it is not so easy. So here is a picture. You see, you start with a OAM beam. These are spatial local. What is this L stand for? Location modulator, spatial location modulator. That is the culprit, which creates entangled state. And you can look at the intensity measurement different nodes. Is that okay? So this can be done classically. This can be done classically. This can be done on a classical platform. That means using the bits. You can even do classical machine learning. You can do information transfer. You can do a whole lot of things. Actually speaking, much of what we call as quantum computation then can be done actually with classical entanglement. That is the wisdom. All that you have to do is look at optics letters, JOSA J, JOSA B. You will see a lot of paper nowadays. Is that okay? So the word quantum is really employing various degrees of freedom so far. This is very disappointing. What is this? They are saying quantum supremacy, no cloning theorem, this, that. And we are actually throwing a damp towel on all our enthusiasm. Is there something genuinely quantum? So in order to understand whether there is genuinely quantum, what we do is to go back to the great master. Is that okay? The great master is none other than Einstein, who identified the first genuine quantum feature. What was that? EPR correlation. You get the point, right? It is the EPR correlation. And what is the hallmark of EPR correlation? The hallmark of EPR correlation was that the two qubits in that particular case, is that right? Are the two decayed particles. That is what they imagined. No, spin zero particle decays into two spin half particles. Imagine that they were far, far away from each other. And Alice made a measurement, Bob made a measurement. Their measurements were such that the information on Alice's measurement did not reach B before Bob made his measurement. The information on Bob's measurement did not reach Alice before she made her measurement. That means they were not causally connected, yet there was a complete correlation. And Einstein said, this I cannot digest, I cannot stomach, I'm not going to understand. He did not question the correctness. He said that it is not simply allowed. There must be a more fundamental theory which will get rid of me of this unpleasant feature. So they said quantum mechanics must be incomplete. They did not say that should be inconsistent. Now what we do is to say that let us invoke non-locality. Now you see why I gave such a large introduction. And that is the famous example of teleportation. And somebody is going to give you a long lecture on teleportation and super dense coding. So what is the idea in teleportation? Alice and Bob share a entangled pair, and there is the psi with Alice. So what Alice will do is she has two qubits. This state and the other qubit that she is sharing with Bob, she will do manipulations. She will do some manipulations and she will make some measurements. And when she performs some measurements, we already know because of the non-local correlation, Bob's state will collapse into so many states. And after making her measurement, she will send a postcard. That is a very important thing. Otherwise, Bob doesn't know in which stage. Sorry. What's happening? Can you please ask them to mute? Okay. Alice is going to perform a measurement in the measurement basis 0, 0, 1, 1, 1, 0, 1, 1. And then Bob will sit in some state which is close to psi or close to psi. Various signs between A and B and the interchange of A and B. Is that okay? That psi is nothing but A0 plus B1. Now, of course, there is no violation of causality, but now Alice will make a phone call and write a postcard. She says, you do some operation on your state, and this is what is called as teleportation. And this teleportation, of course, you see C naught gate. This cannot be implemented by classical entanglement because all the classical entanglement that we looked at was with a given physical wave where there was no spatial separation between the 2 degrees of freedom. So here you see this 0 and this 0 are far away separated from each other. Whereas when I give you K and when I give you P, the polarization, they are both properties of one and the same system. Therefore, the real quantum thing takes place only when we look at spatially separated subsystems, which is not going to happen with your classical wave. Is that okay? Otherwise, your quantum computer, so long as it is compact, actually we want small computers. You get the point, right? That is where a genuine quantum computation is going to play a role. So we are in good hands. So similarly, you have super dense coding. So this is the circuit that I'm showing again to show you the role of the entanglement. Okay, there is a C naught, there is a C naught here and all that. Again, what is happening? Alice and Bob are sharing a entangled pair. All the information is in the correlation. So poor Alice, she doesn't have any information with her. If she makes a measurement, she has no information with her. Poor Bob, he has no information with him. If he makes an measurement, he has no information because the outcome is completely random. Therefore, sharing an entangled pair is very different from Alice having one bit and Bob having one bit. Alice measures her bit, she knows what her bit is. Bob looks at his bit, you know what his bit is because the information is there. The thing is, Bob does not know what Alice has, Alice does not know what Bob has. In this case, Alice does not know what she has, Bob does not know what he has. It's a very peculiar situation. But now Alice does some beautiful things. What Alice will do is, she will do some operation. What are those operations? Pauli operations, nothing more. X, Y, Z or whatever. And she sends her bit to Bob and she instructs him to ye karo, ye karo, ye karo. You do this or that. and suddenly she can send 4 pieces of information. If Bob had a bit and Alice had a bit, Alice could have sent only 2 pieces of one of the 2 pieces of information. 0 would represent 1 piece of information, 1 would represent another piece of information. Now she can send one of the 4 pieces of information. This indeed is a great quantum advantage, again, which cannot be implemented quantum mechanically to the extent that I understand. Is that okay? Probably there is an exception to even this also, God knows what it is. So this is another very, very genuine thing. What is the next one about which the whole world is going agog? Quantum information and quantum computation are extraordinarily important because of 2 reasons. Both the sleuths and the criminals, they want to make RSA encryption because people want to steal money, or you want to encrypt somebody's information. Okay. Everybody is doing the same thing, but we say one person is good, another person is bad, like in a warfare, right? The good guy and the bad guy, the gods and the demons. That is what we have. Is that okay? Similarly, quantum key distribution. I want to send a secret message. Is that okay? I want to make use of this non-locality. Again, I am going to look at this. I am making use of EPRB pairs. This protocol is called the Eckert protocol. You get the point, right? So a spin 0 particle is decaying into 2 spin half particles, imagine, or 2 photons. You can look at polarization. It is completely inherently probabilistic. Nobody knows what the outcome will be. They will be completely correlated. Therefore, when Alice says I got 0, for example, Bob knows for sure that it is equal to 1. So that way, there is a way of creating a one-time encrypted pad. That is what you can do. There are a lot of security issues and all that. I'm not going to get into that. I'm looking at the ideal situation. Again, this is something that can be implemented. So if you go and talk to a defense analyst, is that okay? People sitting in DRDO, I don't know, there may be some people in DRDO here. They come and tell us, I want to build a quantum laser. Is that okay? Therefore, there will be 2 photon beams. Is that okay? No, they will be entangled with each other. I manipulate something here so that the other one, which is like a laser, go and hit the target. The other fellow, if he looks at that, he doesn't know what is happening. There will be no information on what is happening. So they want to build a quantum laser. And typically, whatever is related to defense, whatever is related to violence, attracts a lot of funding. Is that okay? Both by the good guys and the bad guys again. Is that okay? So that way, our quantum information processing has very bright future. All the developments in quantum electrodynamics took place because of the great wartime development in technology, microwave technology. Lamb measured the lamp shift very, very accurately, and QED developed. Is that okay? Development of science is very closely related to development of technology. In some sense, science is the mother of technology and technology is the mother of science. Is that okay? Otherwise, how are we going to do that? And of all the technologies, the warfare technology is what drives us most. Is that right? Violence is our basic instinct. Nah? So that is what is contained here. And of course, apart from all those things, we should all contribute to the security of the nation. So we should work on that. We should work on that coherently. Superposition. You get the point, right? We should work on that coherently, and that is what it is. Now we come back to the question of particle. Is that okay? Because when I said that the source is emitting particles, it is a quantum particle and it is not any ordinary particle. Otherwise, I could have said there is a box, one of them is green, another is, it has 2 balls. It will be either green ball or red ball, and somebody closes eyes and throws away like this. You get the point, right? So when that guy gets green, this guy gets red. When that guy gets red, this guy gets green. That is also perfect correlation. That is not entanglement. You get the point, right? So what is exactly the entanglement? Actually, quantum particles have, first of all, this principle of superposition. But even more importantly, because superposition has one, there is something called statistics. There is a difference between looking at classical wave as a bunch of photons from the sequence of photons which are coming. A bunch of photons, when a classical wave, when it is being detected, there will be a nice Poissonian distribution. But if you are looking at a sequence of photons, there will be a sub-Poissonian or the super Poissonian. You get the point, right? It is not a question of low intensity and high intensity. So people measure what are called as G2 in quantum optics. That is the hallmark of quantum. So please don't think there is a classical wave. You looked at the energy density divided by h nu, you got the number of photons. That is incorrect statement. You have to create a genuine photon. You need SPDC or some such thing or whatever. You need a nonlinear medium. If you did that, and that is what you employ in all these things, teleportation, super dense coding, QKD of various avatars. Is that okay? So it is not that quantum information does not require quantum. It does require, and that appears to me, and I am somewhat convinced, and I hope that I am not wrong, that wherever quote unquote non-locality is to have used non-locality in a very, very specific sense, you should always be possible. Okay. So I had in my mind that I should take 45 minutes and then leave the rest of the time for questions, because this is not a conference. It is a school. I have taken 1 hour 43 minutes. So people say truth is stranger than fiction. Actually, truth is stranger than theorems. Is that okay? Because we physicists are very fond of proving theorems. Theorems of what kind? They are called no-go theorems. Such a thing is not possible. We want to prove. So the minute you do that, there will be a counter example coming from physics. Correct? For example, when people were doing classical probability, they thought nothing can be more than that. Nothing. You get the point, right? It is impossible. But immediately quantum mechanics sprung up and said, no, 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 there is something more than that. At the end of 18th century, 19th century, people thought physics is at an end. There is only a matter of detail. And then came relativity and quantum mechanics, and many of the classical results were gone. But more importantly, what is happening in quantum mechanics is that classical probability theories are all thrown out. Is that okay? That means the theorems were correct, the theorem proofs were correct, but the assumptions that they made were wrong. Even within quantum mechanics, for example, I told you, von Neumann claimed that quantum mechanics cannot admit a local hidden variable description, which is quote unquote classical. Bohm was able to produce an example which is countering. So you go to particle physics, you go to this, you go to that. Is that okay? You find a counter example, because physics comes with a counter with a situation which we have not thought of. So whatever theorems, quote unquote, we might have proved using the qubits, assuming that those qubits are coming from particles, they may not necessarily hold when I'm looking at, qubits coming from waves and classical entanglement. No, there is no vacuumity because waves are extended. Somebody can actually take away a large part of it, etc., etc. Is that okay? So truth is stranger than the theorems, though we should keep our eyes open. We should ask ourselves, have I really understood that? And when you are looking at a theorem, you should ask, the proof is correct, but are the assumptions really valid? Godma gave a very good example. There is a very nice syllogism. Okay, all men must be killed, all bad men must be killed, all Jews are bad, all Jews should be killed. That is perfect reasoning. Except that the statement all Jews are bad is incorrect. You get the point? So we have to question the premises. And what quantum information has taught us is to continuously keep looking at those premises, appreciate them, and who knows, there may be an exception. I think I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And I think, sir, a very excellent lecture by you on the physics of quantum computers. So, everybody know that physics is the science, you can say the science, backbone of science. And that's why physics is involved everywhere. Everywhere in this world, everywhere the physics is involved. So we should take this opportunity to emphasize the importance of physics in all technologies. So you know that technology is the byproduct of fundamental science and engineering. So what kind of technology we are going to develop? Everywhere there is physics involved. So thank you very much, sir. And it's now time for our participants to ask questions. Any doubt, any questions regarding this lecture? You are welcome to ask questions to Professor Ravi Shankar. Yes, any questions from audience, from participants? Yes. No questions. Because if you are a physicist, then you must interact with some kind of questions, curiosity questions in your mind. Okay.
There is a question, I think. There was something flashed.
Anyway, sir.
No, there was something in the chat, I think.
Yeah, you can have chat also.
No, somebody is asking if you can please read it out.
Yeah.
Because it is flashing and it is going away.
Yeah. Anyone can ask their questions through chat box.
Actually, I will stop sharing.
Okay. Okay, fine.
What are the best books for studying quantum information?
Mm.
Okay. So actually, the first book written by Nielsen and Chuang is quite good, although it is dated. I should admit that I'm not the best person to ask this question, because the many things that I learned was as we started working things out and we were looking at papers. But still, Nielsen and Chuang is a very good book. And there is an excellent book written by Mermin, although it does not cover all the topics. Okay, it is called, actually that book is lying on my table here. Quantum Computer Science by David Mermin. I don't know how many of you heard of David Mermin. He is one of the most delightful physicists who wrote any number of articles in American Journal of Physics. In fact, at one point, he wrote a very beautiful article in 1980s, early 1980s or 70s, and Feynman wrote him a paper saying that, thank you for writing this paper article. I am so bored of seeing papers in all these physical review and all that. And that paper was written in American Journal of Physics. Is that okay? And he has a very famous theorem in his name, Mermin-Wagner theorem, in condensed matter. Okay, he is the person who looks at physics in a very, very original way. So you should look at that. Actually, there is a gentleman called what is his name? Sorensen, not Sorensen. He is a student of Umesh Wazirani. He was in MIT. He is a computer scientist. Huh? What is his name? I am not getting his name. Okay. He is an amazing person who believes that one can do quantum computation and information without knowing any quantum mechanics.
Oh.
He said, even if physicists were not there, we would have implemented quantum complex probabilities. I mean, I don't look down upon him. After all, mathematicians thought of complex numbers. So he has that viewpoint. Is that okay? So you should certainly look him up. I am not somehow getting his name. I'm very sorry about that. Is that okay? He is a remarkable person. I think somebody is searching for his name. Okay. Then he moved as a chaired professor to some other smaller place. Is that okay? Aronson. I got the name. See, in Norway, Sweden, everyone is a son. Josephson, Aronson, this son, Samuelson. So this is Aronson. Is that okay? You should certainly read him. Is that okay? And I think that should take care of you. Otherwise, any good textbook would take care. And since you are all teachers, there is the best book to learn, and that is your classroom. Please offer a course. That is how we learn, and that is how all of you should learn. Okay? That is the best thing. Okay.
Yes, Dr. Pritham, you can ask some questions. Dr. Pritham, are you audible to me?
Yeah, he is asking about paraxial approximation.
Dr. Pritham, you can ask something you are asking.
Yes. Sir, can we have any physical interpretation of the quantum entanglement?
I can't hear you.
Sir, any physical interpretation of quantum entanglement? I am audible?
Okay. Yeah, you are audible. I am speechless. Okay. Okay, let me put it this way. If you think you want a classical physical picture, no. I am speaking of a genuine non-locality. You understand that, right? So there are two aspects of entanglement. One aspect of entanglement is mathematical. The parent state is a pure state, like I wrote a superposition. But when I look at the subsystem, one of the subsystems, I lose the information. That is simply, there is no mystery over that. I'm sure Arul will say something about that. Is that okay? What happens? But suppose I have non-locality and I'm finding like an EPR pair or EPR Bohm pair or whatever. Is that okay? Or in Eckert? Is there a classical counterpart? The answer is no. It is genuinely quantum and it cannot be understood in terms of in a classical language. Now, is there a more fundamental picture? No, that is a very deep question. But what I feel is that if there is a deeper picture, the deeper picture will certainly not be what we describe in terms of classical physics. It will be even more murkier. We are sure that quantum mechanics is not the most fundamental thing. Who knows? If you go another 10 orders of magnitude, there may be a theory which is deeper than quantum theory. Nobody can say that quantum theory is the theory, right? There may be a deeper theory and there may be a deeper explanation for your non-locality, but that will certainly not be in terms of classical physics. That much I can tell you.
Okay.
There is a question on paraxial approximation in nuclear phenomena. No, it was not for nuclear phenomena. It was for light waves. Orbital angular momentum wave means they are diverging, but you make an approximation that they are paraxial. The divergence is very small. There will be a neck and it will be going roughly parallel over a given distance. Is that okay? A kind of a beam, collimated, roughly collimated. Let me put it that way. That is where you perform the paraxial approximation. You people must have studied paraxial optics, right? Ray optics is the extreme case.
Extreme case.
Optics. Yeah.
Yes, Dr. Ritesh Yadav, about charge qubit Hamiltonian regarding phase. Dr. Ritesh Yadav, can you open your video? Dr. Ritesh Yadav is here? No.
What was the question anyway? We have 6 more minutes.
Question is about charge qubit Hamiltonian regarding phase.
Oh, I believe that in NMR, how to create a relative phase and all that was discussed yesterday.
Yeah.
You send so let us put it this way. All single qubit interactions can be modeled in terms of an effective Hamiltonian, effective magnetic field. Why? My Hamiltonian is a 2x2 matrix and sigma dot B is a 2x2 matrix. So whatever you write sigma dot some H, that H can be looked upon as a effective magnetic field. What is that effective magnetic field? For example, in the case of polarization, there will be a quarter wave plate, half wave plate combinations. In the case of a real qubit carrying magnetic moment, that will be your real magnetic field. If there are 2 energy levels, then I will send my microwave pulses, which will create linear combinations. That is what people do. So that is how we understand all these things. Is that okay? You can create them.
Yes, Dr. Ritesh, are you satisfied? Yes. Okay, sir. Thank you very much for this insightful lecture and very good lecture for the physics of quantum computers. And in fact, it will really motivate our youngsters, faculty members to get through this quantum computing era, quantum computing world, because really this will be emerging and thrust area right now. So thank you very much, sir. Thanks a lot.
It was a delight being here.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I'm
And there were
sorry.
some questions.
Yeah, any question? Any more?
Sir, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I have a small question, sir.
Sure.
Sir, I'm started working on Qiskit tool, sir. I'm basically interested in that. Sir, can we have dynamic values in Qiskit tool? Like we have only static values like 0 and 1. So can we have dynamic values? Like can I use something like clock? Can I develop it?
Okay, you are looking at my gray hair now? Old man, I have never used Qiskit. But there are people who have used Qiskit and they actually you prepare linear combinations. I don't know. Beyond that, I don't know.
Okay.
I'm very sorry about that. I can't understand your question. But if you can be a little bit patient, somebody from DRDO will be speaking on that, I think.
Okay, sir.
But Qiskit certainly does simulate quantum computation. Is that okay? So you will have all these superpositions. You are not dealing with bits. That much I can assure you. In fact, one of my students did quite a lot of it on Qiskit for his quantum machine learning. But I was not a part of that.
Okay, sir. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Excuse me, sir. I have a very basic question.
Oh, okay.
Sir, students feel very difficult in understanding the quantum mechanics, or even many teachers feel very difficult in understanding the quantum mechanics. So what is the best method to learn the quantum mechanics?
Quantum mechanics is like falling in love and leading a married life, So you have to be patient. People say familiarity leads to contempt. Actually, a certain amount of familiarity is always required. The understanding comes at after quite a time. Is that okay? So there are two things that we have to do. First thing is that we have to work out a lot of examples. There is no escape from that. Is that okay? And since we
Okay.
are teachers, we have to keep on asking ourselves, have you understood or not? And every time a student says there is a simple question and a silly question, let us be on our toes and listen to it carefully because they are the deadliest of the questions. So quantum mechanics is counterintuitive. Is that okay? No, understanding is a very loaded word. Okay, we can all get derailed by using the word understanding. I'll give you an example from music. How do I get a perfect note? You know, there are these great Drupad singers who get the perfect note and they can make a minute. You can say, I have to get the perfect note before I start singing. That is not the way it works. You will learn sargam, you will learn things, you will learn khayal, you will learn all the bandishes, thai, antara, and all that. You have not got the perfect note. But after a lot of practice, you get the perfect note. And when you are teaching, you start with that perfect note. But that comes with a lot of practice. You get the point, right? So we have to know what we don't understand and we have to proceed. The point is that we should not pretend that we have understood. Even the single particle problem is a very complicated thing. What is why saying e to the power of ik dot x? I can't even give a probability distribution because I cannot normalize the wave function. So a student may have that problem, but the student cannot say, until I solve this problem, I will not study harmonic oscillator. One day the student will understand what matters is relative probability, or imagining that a particle can lie anywhere between minus infinity, infinity is my idealization. Particle is in a lab, in between the detector and the whatever that thing is, right? So there are all this wisdom will come late. So the word is patience, I think. Okay, we have to study.
Okay, sir.
Yeah.
Okay, sir. Okay.
I
Okay.
know
Thank you,
it's a
sir.
very good question because otherwise, you know, foundations are always slipped at the end, unlike building a house. In a house,
Yeah.
we lay the foundations. Here, we keep on slipping the foundations as we understand more and more.
Thank
Okay,
you.
sir. Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Okay.
It's a very interacting session, and I am happy that all participants have asked such kind of questions. Really, it's very interacting. So thank you to everybody. Now the next lecture will start from 11:30 by Professor Arul Lakshminarayan from IIT Madras, and he will talk on quantum entanglement. Okay.
So remember whatever I said, please, and in the other lectures also. Bye.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you,
very
sir.
much, sir.
Okay. Bye.
Okay, okay. You should leave now. Yeah. Everybody should meet at 11:30.